Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's Omar. That's David. I am Charles. And we are so happy to be with you all today. The topic of the day is going to be mentorship. And we have our fearless leader who's leading it today. So, brother, you take it over and we will take your lead.
What up? What up? Bueno. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the South Star Classroom. Great to see everybody. In honor of our friend Jubilee, who is feeling much better health-wise, who we hope will join us again soon, I'm going to lean very much into the very quick, how was your week? What is going on with you? Tell us something cool. Doc, you are going to Arizona. Just real quick, man. How you been?
Well, you can't be telling people the location. I tell people afterwards, brother. You know what I'm saying? Got people might be looking for you.
It's a big ass state, man. What you could be in Tucson, you could be in Phoenix, you could be in Douglas for all we know, man. It's a big ass state.
It's not very many places people that don't live in Arizona are going to Arizona for.
There's Flagstaff, there's Tempe.
I'm not going to any of those places.
Where are the California people have flooded to these days? Scottsdale.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Scottsdale is right next to Phoenix, so there you go. But I'm good, man. A little tired, but blessed. Like you said, I got some traveling this week and next week. Next week we have the next stop in the tour of the new Niagara that I do, and that's basically a take on W.B. Du Bois's Niagara movement, which is where the NAACP was formed. So far, we've done we did Memphis, we've done Philly, we've done Atlanta, and next week will be Houston before we finish in Chicago November 1, and then we have a culminating experience, it looks like, in Puerto Rico. So getting all this data from Black folks around the state of education, writing out these reports and building these platforms based off of what people in these heavily Black, these heavy Black cities had to say about their experiences. So I'm excited for it, man.
Okay. It's a good ass time, man. Traveling around the world. David Castillo, the beard of knowledge. Brother, how you doing today?
I am doing well. Quick check-in. Was able to watch the UFC fights on Saturday evening. I don't know if you all caught that, but outside of the fighting, the entire event was billed as a kind of an homage to Mexico, Mexican culture. I think half of the fighters were of Mexican descent. And it was at the Sphere in Las Vegas, and they kind of walked the audience through like 5 or 6 stages of Mexican history from its origins in Tenochtitlan all the way through modern day in that environment. And it was pretty incredible. So, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a tall task for the, for the UFC. Like, hey, I got a lot of respect and love for Dana White. Didn't think he'd do that. So
he did.
And it was at the Sphere, and the Sphere looks beautiful. The Sphere is gorgeous. So
yeah,
you gotta get that Latina audience, man. There's a lot of money.
Oh,
yeah.
A lot of money.
You're gonna get that though. I feel like in fighting, you're gonna get like that Mexican, that Black, that Irish. Like it's very like tribal.
Yeah,
like,
the Mexican, because we're throwing a chancla inside of that octagon, baby. We're throwing that chancla.
Hey, man, listen.
Throwing that boomerang stand-up
Floyd Mayweather knew how to do his contracts. He knew to fight on Cinco de Mayo and to fight whoever was the biggest Mexican fighter. And Oscar De La Hoya knew to fight whoever was the biggest Black fighter. Like those fan bases, they pay money. They pay, and they bet a lot. So it's a lot of gambling that went on for that UFC fight.
I'm glad you brought that up, David, because it's a very interesting correlation. I think she was the featherweight fighter, famously was talking about her training in El Paso. So she specifically came to El Paso. Trying to remember her name. I can look it up right now. I was just looking at some video clips of it recently. And she specifically was talking about how much she loved El Paso and why she decided to come train here. And she was talking about not just the altitude is higher, so it's better for training, but she just loves the culture and the people and why it meant so much to her to have several months training in El Paso, which was like un orgullo para nosotros, like a huge level of pride that someone stopped in to do their training here for that specific event, which is pretty great. So ups to that fantastic movement. All is good here. We miss our friend Jubilee. We hope to see her back soon and checking in with her. Fall is upon us, and with that comes a lot of data analysis, some weather breaking. But for me, we're getting close to, I'm going to be gone, just as a huge heads up to our audience and to our fellow hosts. Most of October, I am going to actually be traveling abroad. During that time, I'm actually taking my mom's on a trip. So it's going to be pretty exciting. Yeah, man. This all started because like the idea was initially for us to first go to Machu Picchu as a huge, what is it called, like bucket list place for her. She's extremely into indigenous cultures and has done an immense amount of research and work. And her master's was in Spanish, so there was a lot of historical research on that topic. And when we started looking into it, she'd have to get like 10 vaccinations to get down there, and my mom's about to turn 77. So dude, it was sad. It was weird because like I watched my mom's like heart sink right in front of me of like this huge thing that she then suddenly realized she couldn't do. So I just felt this like massive impetus to be like, okay, well, if you can't do this, let's go do something that you can. So I'm taking her to Great Britain. She's also a huge literary person. So we're going on a huge literary tour, man. C.S. Lewis, Chaucer, Shakespeare.
I've been to London and I've seen like it's like the Shakespeare Theater is in there somewhere. I kind of in
the Globe Theater.
I didn't get a chance to spend time there because I was in Paris and just kind of popping in and out on the train, but that's gonna be awesome, man. That's gonna be awesome. Are you gonna take her there?
I'm excited. Yeah. So for sure, the Globe Theater. We're going to Stratford upon Avon, which is where Shakespeare's from. We're going to actually get into the house. We'll be seeing a ton of stuff involving Chaucer. There's all the Arthurian legend is in a place called Glastonbury Abbey, supposedly. There's this amazing book called Mists of Avalon that my sister made me read years ago, where it talks about the Arthurian legend from the perspective of females. So I'm trying to remember the name of the protagonist, Mallory. I'll think of it in a second. My names are slipping, but it wasn't from necessarily the perspective of Guinevere, even though she was like a centrifugal character in that. But a lot of that takes place clearly in this area that we're going to go visit, Stonehenge, Scotland. So pretty exciting. So I'm going to miss everybody while we're off, but our fearless co-hosts are going to hold it up in October. So speaking of fearless hosts, our host, the real Dr. Charles Cole, has made a mainstay, ladies and gentlemen, being an exceptional writer, an exceptional researcher. And one of the things that he's done an immense amount of research into is what are the practices that bolster student performance, and what can families do in order to be greater advocates in their children's education. One of those topics is our topic for today. So, gentlemen, are we ready to launch into this or what?
Let's do it, brother.
Let's do it, man. Today's show, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of mentorship. So just a quick, before we even get into the show, if you've got a killer mentor or mentor story, jump in on the comments. We'd love to hear them. We're going to share little mentorship stories ourselves. But just to set the plate, I had the idea of why don't we have a full show discussing what the power of mentorship does? And I think that we all know that mentorship is a very positive contributing factor, or positively contributing factor to kids and to their development. But as we started doing some research, I found some very fascinating information. So our show today is going to center around how does mentorship positively impact the lives of students? And I think we're going to start getting into what are some of the things that not only our schools can do, but you all could do, our audience can do, to start galvanizing the opportunity for your students, your children, to seek the benefit of some really successful mentors. So while we know, and I think we've got the first article, if someone could pop that one up for me, please. That mentorship, we all know that it can have an extraordinarily strong impact, but the statistics are actually kind of fascinating. So for students that are mentored, they have found that 55% are less likely to skip a day of school. So if you're a student who's being mentored, you have a 55% less likely chance to skip a day of school. If you're a child that's being mentored, you have a 78% higher likelihood to participate in civic engagement and volunteer opportunities. If you are a child being mentored, you have a 90% more likely shot of giving back and being a mentor yourself. And this one was the startling one. If you've been mentored, 130% chance that you're going to hold a leadership position. Those are some strong statistics.
Yeah.
There is improved consistency in terms of the life of the child going through school and being consistent across their academic study. But as you see here, 46% less likely chance to do drugs, 27% less likely to not drink, or to not start drinking. And then interestingly enough, as we've talked a lot about SEL, they have found that mentorship greatly reduces depressive symptoms. So I think we all can agree that mentorship has had a very positive impact in our lives, that clearly there's statistical evidence to demonstrate that it's a very positive thing. But I kind of want to focus our show on three things today, which is one, did we have mentors? And if we could share a quick story about mentorship and what that mentorship kind of looked like. B, what are some things that we can be doing in our schools to develop this specific skill set or ability for our kids to be mentored? And then C, what can you as parents do if your school may not have all the structures? So gents, kind of want to just throw it up to you about the stats, first thoughts, and maybe a mentorship story or two if you've got one.
I'm sharing the article, David. So go ahead. I'm because they're on LinkedIn, so I'm gonna get the name for him.
All right, no problem. Yeah. So interestingly enough, I mean, I didn't have. I think growing up as a young person, I didn't have I think any. Well, maybe it's hard to find like a formal mentor versus an informal mentor. It's kind of all the same. But looking back, it tended to be, people that were like in my family, to some extent, like older brother, older family members. And then when I eventually, moved into high school, I think, we've talked about this before. My mentors were like my coaches, right? They were like my athletic coaches. They had this like dual role of helping me to, do well and excel in a particular sport. But then they were also played that role of mentor because they saw things in you that, that I didn't. They saw things in me that I didn't see in myself, right? And kind of helped to set me up to say like, yeah, you can definitely do this, right? You can do this thing. So just in terms of so for me, it's kind of a mix of like informal and formal. As I moved into my professional life, primarily in education, again, mainly like informal, like they happen to be like my principals. When I was a teacher, my principals were always kind of like played a mentoring role to me. And then ultimately, when I had like enough years of experience, then things kind of shifted where I was like hiring, like younger teachers, educators, administrators. And eventually I moved into that role of becoming the mentor for other people. So we didn't really have like the formalized structures, but another quick story on this is that my son's school, they have a regional, it's actually a county-wide leadership program. It's a mentoring program. So Middle school students are mentored by high school students, and then those middle school students go to high school and mentor middle school students, right? In this like leadership framework curriculum. And my son's been part of that program ever since he was in middle school. And now he's participating in the high school program, going back to mentor students at his old middle school. So it's kind of come full circle.
That is what's up.
And he loves it. He wants to do it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there it is, right? Like he's part of that, 96%, the 90% of kids who were mentored will then become a mentor themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That is a profound impact. Doc, what about you, brother?
Yeah, man. I was trying to think of like the formal mentorship. I think part of the reason I did so much research in is because I had some here and there, but probably could have benefited more from it. And using it, especially when I was going through college as the only person in my family that ever went. I think, but I'll say my coaches, I think my basketball coaches throughout my life have been kind of that, like, and they just provided a structure. They just provided guidance. And, they got to, coaches get to talk different than teachers, man. Like, that basketball coach or that wrestling coach in middle school in the 7th grade, they teach her during class time, but in practice, they chewing your ass out, man. And I think it was, and I think also my parents did a good job of giving them permission to do that. Like my parents were always like, you go harder, So I think that was real big. I also think that I could have benefited so much from having more mentorship when I was in college, especially like I tell this story and people tend to laugh because it's funny, but it was the truth. Like I'm the only one in my family ever going to college. So when me and my mother were registering and went to orientation and you get to pick out your classes, we picked it like a high school class. I was going to school from every day from 7:30 to 3 because I didn't know that you can go Tuesdays and Thursdays or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And you're locked in that first year that I did, I was kind of locked in because it was a program to make sure people graduated. So, they wanted to have some consistency. So again, would have definitely benefited from having somebody to show you those ropes. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with surviving and thriving, especially when it's like new stuff. And I think the career piece was really good. Like that over 100% around you will be in some type of leadership position with mentorship from that leader. I think that's really, really powerful and people should take heed.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've had a lot of personal experience and I'll jump into this in a second. But this meant a lot to me because I think growing up, it took me a while to be like, did I even have a mentor? I was a little bit like, David being like, I did a lot of mentoring. And in retrospect, I thought about in this conversation, 2 people. As you all heard, taking my mom on vacation. My mom is like an extraordinary person. And she was absolutely first teacher, first mentor. And just as a quick aside, my mom and I have a very funny relationship, man. We got Mom and Boogie. Boogie is my nickname. And that is like, what you would consider to be the like Latino doting mother and the kind of bumbling idiot son. And then we have a very interesting professional relationship of Tita and Omar. And Tita, is my mom's name, is a civil rights leader, educator, teacher. When she was running Upward Bound, this TRIO program at UTEP, her statistics are through the roof. She was taking low income, at risk, failing students, and with just 6 months or 6 weeks in the summer, and every Saturday, getting kids who were failing miserably into valedictorian positions, full rides at colleges, who then went later on to PhD programs. I attribute that a lot to her skill set, but to her mentorship. Mm-hmm. And my sister and I were extraordinarily high beneficiaries of Tita being an extraordinary mentor to us about how to kind of navigate a very, very difficult world. Like I can tell you in 5th grade it's kind of a famous story. I've shared it before, where my teacher kind of pulled me aside after school or told me to come to our classroom after school and kind of started throwing down all my exams. And she's like 92, 97, 100, 98. She's like, are you cheating in my class? And I was like, what, dude? Like cheating? Like I'm working my ass off in this class. And she cut me off and she's like, yeah, because I don't think a dirty little Mexican like you could ever do this well in my class.
Wow.
Like, that's some shit, right?
Somebody said that?
Yeah, that was my 5th grade teacher, dude. This Kuhnhaus. Yeah. Yeah, she was a real treat. Yeah.
Not too long ago. Not too long ago. This is not like
yeah. And like, how old are you in 5th grade? You're like 12? No, not even, bro.
No, you're not 10. Even 12. You're like 10 or
yeah. Because you're You're 13 in 7th grade, 12 in 6th grade. Yeah, 11. Yeah, so I was about 10, 11 years old, dude.
Yeah, that's a lot, bro.
It took my mom, and this is going to be germane to what my boy Julio Cotto was just sharing with us. Like, it took my mom to sit me down and mentor me through, like, this is, and we all got that talk, right? I don't know if Doc, you got that talk, or David, you got that talk. It's like, you know, being Latino or being Black in the United States, like, you got to work 3 times harder, dress 3 times more, be 3 times more educated. We are all shaking our head. Like, we all got that talk. And I got that talk from my mom when I was in 5th grade. And that is the sign of an exceptional mentor. In addition to that, and this is kind of a funner story, dude, I started playing tennis at the age 6. Because my mom was trying to figure out my mom, right? What sport can I put my extraordinarily temper-driven son into? Dude, I was not the calm Buddhist dude that you see today, dude. Like, massive temper, massive, like, I just didn't know what to do with all this energy, right? Like, imagine a 6-year-old with all this knowledge and frenetic energy and skill sets and, you know, gifts, if you want to call them. And I was like, dude, my mom's like, I got to do something with this kid. I got to channel this somewhere. So it's that sports related mentorship that you both kind of experienced. And she's like, she's thinking through all the sports and she's like, this guy's going to kill all of his teammates or the opposing team. So what sport can I put this kid in where he is as far away from his opponent as possible and by himself? So she's like, I got it, tennis.
That's
and
great.
Like, we can,
like, but that's a football, soccer coach. That's a physical, wrestling coaches, boxing. That's their dream. Like, give me the angstiest kid that wants to, like, I got this.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that they were well suited enough to deal with me, because I did, in fact, like, get in other sports, and these coaches are just like, this kid's way too much, man. Like, oh my God. And the thing was, I followed instruction really well, but I'd push back if I didn't have respect, and especially if I didn't have intellectual respect. So my coach, starting in 6th grade, a guy named Jonathan Snell, an amazing human being, man. From 6th grade
John Snow is your
all
coach?
the way through high school. Yeah, Jonathan Snell. And
I don't even watch Game of Thrones, but you had.
Yeah, it sounds like a Game of Thrones kind of name, right?
Yeah, no, it is. Dude, that's the main guy. It was Jon Snow. It's like
Jon. No, this guy's name is John Snell.
Right? Snell.
Yes.
I thought you said Jon Snow. Oh, my bad. Sorry.
You know nothing, Jon Snow. That dude, man. Yeah, close enough, right? Dude was my coach and was a humongous mentor in my life from age 6 all the way to 18. Funny story, he wrote my letter of rec to college. So, and that letter of rec, when I showed up to the admissions office at Stanford and was like, I think you guys made a mistake. And Ana Maria Porras, God bless her soul, had passed away, was sitting down with me and she's like, Omar, A, this is Stanford. We don't make mistakes. And I was like, ooh. And B, she's like, let me show you why you got in. And the letter of rec was one of the best letters of rec she ever read in her entire life. Because imagine this encapsulation of knowing somebody from age 6 to age 18. And imagine the power that this man had, not only in my life, but in the kinds of future decisions of college. So that then turned, and I'll be quick, to what Julio and I participated. So, ladies and gentlemen, Julio Cotto is an amazing human being. He's the vice president at the National Hispanic Institute. He's a close personal friend, but a badass of a human being, civil rights leader, leadership trainer. And when we got into the National Hispanic Institute, this was a program that not only was about teaching leadership skills and communication skills and critical thinking skills and creative problem solving, very much about mentorship. And we can probably think back, I can certainly, to the students who were older that mentored us, who are going off to insane colleges and doing incredible things. We're talking like kids would line up and be like, I'm going to Georgetown, I'm going to Notre Dame, I'm going to Grinnell, I'm going to Claremont McKenna, I'm going to, Yale. It's like, holy crap. But then the power and influence that had for us to then become mentors, because I started teaching and mentoring pretty much when I was like, God, dude, age 13, because of that mentorship quality. So I think for the most part, we are now looking at, okay, this had a profound impact on Julio Cotto, on Doc, on David, on me. And it's a question of, I bet our audience is like, well, how do I get that for my kid? So some of the things I'd love to get into is like, why don't our schools pay enough attention to this, and what can we do about it inside of our schools?
Yeah,
Gentlemen,
I think that's what my first one was like, it was, the older kids had to come and do like reading stuff with us or whatever. So it kind of was implemented in my schools. That's kind of where I saw it first. I actually think while it's great and we should push schools to do it, I think that actually should start from parents at home, like pushing that and identifying that and teaching you how to get it. And I also think that mentorship is a two-way thing. I think one should always be being mentored and be mentoring, because I think being a mentor actually makes you better. When somebody's watching you, you tend to do better and be better. I think we could probably inverse those things. And then I'll shut up here so David can go. But you talked about how not long ago that was, David and Omar, around them calling you like whatever they called you. Everybody here knows Ruby Bridges, the young lady that helped desegregate schools. Well, Ruby Bridges has an Instagram page. Like, Ruby Bridges is like young. Like, she's not 112. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, she has like an active, she's like here. She's not elderly. Yeah. She's just, I just wanted us to understand how not long ago all this stuff was, when you said that I had to find that, because somebody put that on Twitter the other day, like, oh, Ruby Bridges is like outside. You know what I'm saying? So, but that's my piece on mentorship, David. I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I think in schools, I think the question was like, why do we not see this happening more in schools in like formalized ways, I believe. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like one more thing that schools have to like plan for and facilitate and support and sustain. So, it's easy for something like, let's have a focus on mentorship to kind of fall off, when things end up having to get eliminated, right? Or you figure out what you can't do. However, I do think there's a couple of interesting angles here. When I've seen it work very well in schools that have like a long extended grade span. So like I was at a TK through 8th school. We had the middle school students in the same building with the elementary school students. And so we were able to set up, not like school wide, but we were able to identify young students that needed some kind of mentorship. And sometimes that meant like, just, I'm going to sit with you and read a book. Right.
Like, this is not a money thing.
Yeah. No, it's just like, it's like somebody to talk to, right? Who's like kind of close to your age, but they're not really close to your age. It's happening within the schools. We actually trained, our students to do this work. Like, here are some suggested activities. Here's where it could happen. And so we found that to be very, very popular. Those relationships would last. I mean, they probably still last to this day. These kids are like out of school now. So I think that's one way. And it's interesting because a lot of times, like it might really be about somebody needing a mentor, but again, student might need help with like reading. There might be a literacy issue. So you can kind of do both of those things in the same vein. And then the older students get something out of it, like Charles was saying, right? You give back, right? And you're able to like, kind of see the impact of your work, even if you could be like a 7th grader mentoring a 4th grader, and that, students are able to like capture that, like, this feels good, like helping people out, right? It's not
I got to
like
ask a
rocket
question.
science. Yeah.
I got to ask a question about that. And I'll bring up something that our boy, Dr. Benitez, created when he was in high school. But like, I've always been of the opinion that, and we talk about this, especially in the charter world, if you're not intentional about creating culture in the school, the culture is going to create itself. And that culture, you don't want anything to do with that culture, because that's like kid driven. And like, as much as we love kids shouldn't be in charge of creating the culture of a school. So I think one of the things that I ask is, you both have the benefit of what sounds like a structured program. Someone who is intentionally saying, hey, we got a program here where older kids are working with younger kids. Was that the case that you both had, or did it just kind of naturally happen, or what?
No, I mean, at the schools that I've been at, it's always been intentional. And let's say, not to go down like the rabbit hole, but let's say Omar is like a 4th grader, and Omar is in need of some kind of an intervention. It might be academic, it might be social emotional. We've talked to Omar's parents, and we've all agreed that mentoring could potentially be an intervention for Omar. So it's not something that we just kind of like decide, one person decides. It's like a team effort. We're going to talk to Omar about it and say, Omar, how would you feel about, working with Charles once a week on Friday afternoons? You get like half hour, you guys can read, it can help you with your homework. You can talk to make a connection, right? And it's also for students that like might not have a good connection to your school, like maybe like a student that is new, or they transferred in mid-year, right? Having that kind of mentor connection can be very powerful. But no, it was kind of like part of our bag of intervention tools, right?
Yeah, okay. Mine was similar. Like in elementary, it was like a part of service. So, you kind of were honored if you got to be asked to do it. And then I transferred to a high school in Stockton for my senior year. And they had the cheerleaders do this thing for all new students that were transferring in. So like a cheerleader was like my person for like a semester. She was bad too. But yeah, like I thought that was very like, I thought that was creative. And this, again, this is not a money thing. Everybody always talks about money. Like that's just like, it's just like a real thing. Like you can be creative. Like another example of schools being creative is like, people struggle with uniforms. I worked with this school in Indianapolis, and what they did is they have a strong uniform policy, but the better you do, like with GPA or stuff like that, you get to wear these different color sweaters. So everybody wants that sweater. It did 2 things. One is promoting the uniforms, but 2, it's also like giving you something for academically excelling. So, just for those people that saying we ain't got money to do this, that, and the third, that's true. And some of this shit is just, you need to be creative.
Yeah. And you also, one other thing about some of the work that we did, and this was like school-wide work. Think about the way that the Montessori model is set up, where students are put into classrooms that span like a 3-year, time, right? 3 to 5, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, your primary, lower elementary, upper elementary, middle school. So you actually have that built in to the Montessori model, where you're going to have kids that are in the same classroom with students that are maybe 2 years younger than they are. So you automatically have this fertile ground to, and it's not like you're not setting up systems. It in the right environment, it happens organically, especially if you were part of that as a younger student. If I'm brand new to a classroom and Charles is in my classroom and he's 2 years older than I am, and I remember him helping me how to do certain things in the classroom, find certain things. When I'm his age, I'm going to help those younger people, right? Because somebody helped me, right? It kind of becomes part of the fabric of the culture of a school. And, you can do it it can happen in any kind of environment with some intention.
Yeah, agree.
That's school culture.
Ain't it crazy? Who'd have thought?
Yeah, but that's exactly the point that I want to make today is that mentorship it's a structural component that unless someone is intentional in thinking about it is never going to happen, but it's so easy and free and so successful. It begs the question for me, why aren't we significantly more intentional about these high impact practices in our school? And why is it that some kids get to luck out from this situation and some kids don't? And I mean, like those kids lucky enough to get coaches who are great mentors like me, like us, like that's badass, right? But dude, I went to Franklin High School in El Paso. That ain't shit. That was like Lord of the Flies, man. Like if that high school taught me anything, it was like how to survive in the all-American high school where everyone's a dick. Like,
well, there's some value in that, right?
Right.
There was, because it taught me a lot on how to like be prepared for certain kinds of people, a certain population that I saw a lot more of when I was in college, how to deal with like disgustingly entitled like elitist kids who did nothing to be elite other than get born to a rich family. It was just kind of a disgusting scenario, but I supplemented my high school experience with where Julio works, the National Hispanic Institute, and the structure of that place was unbelievable. So you participated in a freshman program called the Great Debate, and you would learn how to for months, you would work with a team and trainers on learning mock trial or cross-examination or extemporaneous speech or oratory. And you had coaches, and those coaches were mentors. What was really exceptional about the really well-organized regions, and El Paso, when I was participating, was an extraordinarily well-organized region run by, guess who? My mom, who is an extraordinary leader of that program. Bro, like, sophomore year, you became a junior counselor, and now all of a sudden you're a sophomore and you're mentoring the freshmen, but you're getting mentored by the juniors and seniors. And that structural integrity, it's like kind of like Doc was saying, yo, like we did this sweater thing, and that's badass. I had an idea like that and I need to see it through. I wrote down a note and I was like, what the hell? Like I had that idea and I gotta bring it to fruition at EPLA.
So proudly, bro.
Badass. Is a great, and then they, by just sheer influence of that sweater, kind of become a model and mentor, being like, oh, that's something that I can aspire to, which is badass, right? But you have that structural component that then takes a life force of its own, where yes, the teachers and the admin may start a mentorship component, but much like that statistic of over 90% of kids who are mentored will become mentors, how does that become an ingrained part of the school culture that gets perpetuated positively by kids? And that is kind of what I'm leading up to is, like these things can be created in schools. There's fantastic ways of having these conversations. And Doc, you may want to pull up your worksheet. Our own Dr. Charles Cole, which we'll share the link to, wrote an incredible ebook kind of guiding parents on, look, if there's not a formal process of how this works, here's some structural ways that you can get to know your teachers and get to know the adults in your school so that they're, look, man, like I hate to say it, but like people are people, right? And the squeaky wheel kind of gets the grease. And Doc's invented some really cool ways of saying, hey, if you're a parent and you can just, here's some guidelines, here's some questions, here's some way of having conversations with your teachers for your teacher to get to know your kid a lot better. Humans are always going to gravitate towards the people that they build relationships with. And that is where mentorship comes from. And this is the kind of, Doc, I got to hand it to you, man. You've got an exceptional way of taking very complicated scenarios and simplifying them to make them accessible for anybody. Like, just got to tell you, huge shout out on that. Because as I was going through the book today, I was like, dude, this is not easy stuff. And you have got the mental dexterity to break it down, make it simple, and make it applicable to people's lives. So for our audience, if you don't have this ebook, we can share it over the comments.
Yeah.
And it's really good. It is really good.
Thank you for that, man. And we kind of teach people how to collaborate. I mean, that's what the ebook kind of is, right? It's like its own version of like, you know, like a mentor. Like if you didn't have one, like how do you navigate the school thing? What helps you, you know? And it's okay to not know. It's okay to not have it. And I'll put the link in. I actually thought you were talking about Stop Hustling Backwards, which is a book that I wrote for first generation college kids. And one of the notes in there is for them to get a mentor and how. Like it just teaches them to introduce themselves to, you know, their professors and to the financial aid office. Like make sure they know your name and your face and just general things that you kind of had to be there to know. And the funny thing is, I think people can like easily, if you give me like 2 minutes, because I don't want to take up too much time, but I want to share this thing.
It's our show, man.
I think sometimes people, you know, think that we're only talking about kids. Like, no, if you're a new teacher or if you're a seasoned teacher, you should be mentoring. And if you're a newer teacher, you should be looking for who the best teachers are there so they can like operate with you. And I saw this because I'm a football fan. Bryce Young was like the #1 pick. He plays for Carolina. He's had a bad few games and he just got benched. He's worth a lot of money. And all these pundits today are like, they thought they were going to come down on this kid, but they're like, no, this system is terrible. Like because he's the #1 pick, you don't have a quarterback there to mentor and guide him. And like Tom Brady sat for years before he played, right? Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre for years. I just wanted to share one of the most successful people in their field talking about how they view this.
Man, it's so impactful because it's
got to add it to the stage,
right? All right, let me add it. My bad.
Yeah, please.
The other person.
Hold on. Let me start it back. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
Vision of a relationship comes down to one word: caring. Do you care about the other person, and do you collectively care about what you're trying to achieve? The only way people are going to feel that they can trust you is if you care about them. So if you just see them as a transactional relationship, oh, you're just here for this time being, well, that's all they're going to give you. But I felt like I need to connect, especially as I got older. I got to connect with the young players. I need a relationship. I need the ability to relate to them. They need to trust me. I need to trust them. We need to be vulnerable to one another. I need to care for them. And my
that's
vision.
I just thought that was interesting.
Yep. That's like relational over transactional, right?
And you can take that out of the context of football or sports.
Of course.
Like if you're running a school, you know what I'm saying? It's like, if I got to trust you to have my back, is because basically what he's saying, I'm going to ask these young guys to go and run through a wall for me. I'm older. Like I'm in the business of winning championships. So like, it's not about, I need these people. You can call me the greatest of all time, but every time somebody new comes in, I'm taking them to dinner. I'm spending time with them. I'm giving them game. Why aren't you doing that in your school? Like, why aren't you doing that in your community? I just thought it was, I think when you hear people like a Tiger Woods or a Michael Jordan or a Tom Brady, like who had this success, and they're like, no, I had to build these relationships. I think it's really interesting.
There's something else here around this like mentorship conversation, which I think pushes against particular elements of, I could say, Latino culture, and I will say African American culture, and also the culture of men, right? Where like we don't ask for help, right? Asking for help, putting a hand out, taking somebody's advice with an open mind and an open heart, in many cases is seen as a weakness, right? Because you can't do it yourself, right? Like the classic analogy of like the dad who's driving the car and gets lost and he's like, no, I got this. We're just going to stay lost for another hour. But then the other angle is that, and I know this happened with me growing up, you know, in my community, where I was like one of the very few people in my social group growing up in high school that went to college, and how people, you know, treated me as a result of that. Like I was like chastised. I was, you know, kind of pushed out of the social group, you know, for what? Because I was trying to like advance myself. And so
te crees bien, te crees mero mero, vato, ¿qué?
Exactly. And there's this other piece of like,
I understood none of that. Continue.
We've been like,
it's the equivalent of Chris Rock being like, oh, you got a master's?
Yeah.
And this other thing that we have, you know, and I'm thinking about like, I'm thinking about comedians like George Lopez, right? That is incredibly successful, yet he feels like he doesn't owe anything to younger Latino comedians that are trying to come up, right? Like you get through that door and then you want to close it, right? How much of that do we have in our communities, right? So this idea of mentorship kind of pushes against all of that, right? And it says, no, we're not competing, right? We're working together, right? And somebody helped me. Now I'm going to help somebody, right? Everybody has a particular role. And it's something basic, like, you know, mentoring, where you're sharing information, you're sharing important lessons. Some of it to some people might seem like straightforward and common sense, but we didn't all have that information growing up, right? So like, well, whatever it is, like, hey, save your money, believe me, trust me, don't blow all your money, you know, or you know, buy a house as soon as you can, or you know, or whatever it is, you know, these like life lessons that, you know, some of us got and some of us didn't. And I think the idea of mentoring is like a very human concept that pushes against this competition that we have in our communities, that only work to like tear us down, right? Like nobody else is doing it. We're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's an insanely impactful comment. Go ahead, Doc.
No, it's fine. I just was gonna say, I mean, it's just really interesting. I think, and you said something, Dave, and I was like, I wanted to yell at all three of us. Like, you were like, oh, and as men, I'm like, oh, you know what? We should have definitely, like, you know, since Jube has been out for a little bit, probably did like a show about us processing things as men, because I think that's actually really interesting. I was just gonna say that, but in the George Lopez thing, I know there's a young comedian that spoke up, and, you know, he kind of gave him grace, but he was just like, he wasn't really feeling it. And I would have loved to learn from George, but I respect him because he's George Lopez. And then you look at Eddie Murphy. If you look at every popping black comedian today, Eddie Murphy put them on early. Chris Rock was the mail boy in Boomerang. Dave Chappelle was the bad guy in Nutty Professor. Like Marlon Wayans, who he's known since he was a kid. Like he put him
Beverly
in
Hills
like
Cop.
these movies. Yeah, I mean he put like all this stuff, and he put him in
that's mentorship. That's mentorship.
And also said, I'm not gonna give it to you, but like here, like let me show you this. Or when a young rapper goes and works with an Eminem, you can feel how you want. But every young rapper leaves and is like, oh, that dude is relentless. Like he is like working really hard. Like sometimes somebody gotta show you, and you know what I'm saying? And it'll open up a world for you. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I was gonna double that and just say, first, David, like Jesus, they call you Beard of Knowledge for a reason, brother. Like such an astute comment about, I think, Latinos who don't leave the breadcrumbs, who kind of shut that door. And as long as we got like Julio on the show, huge shout out, NHI, National Hispanic Institute, that was invented by a guy named Ernie Nieto, who's just a brilliant, brilliant dude. That was his shtick. It was like, dude, like, how do we build something and create something where we go against the relentlessness of our culture? How do we build something where we're not just doing leadership training, but it becomes this like force of Latinos who all love each other, take care of each other, look out for each other, not only leave the breadcrumbs, but have the responsibility of saying, I got this knowledge. Now I need to do something to improve the community. Like I give a lot of kudos to Tita, my mom, because she had that same ideology, but that ideology was completely in line with Ernesto Nieto's ideology, and I got to hand it to him and the National Hispanic Institute and Julio. You're talking about an organization that has now seen tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Latinos go through it, changing that exact ideology really through mentorship. because yes, the programs, but when we saw older kids doing it, it made such a massive impact because like, oh, this is the way it's done. And it changed that ideology, and those conversations changed it. And I got to tell you, Doc, you said something really impactful, which is we can be, you know, our respective ages. I'm in my 40s, and my closest friend here in El Paso, now one of my closest friends, Red Asfahani, the guy's like an older brother in many respects, man. Just his knowledge and perspective and way that he thinks through things and talk. I listen. It's like I've grown so much just from being in a friendship with him. And that's something that happened late in life. So for our audience members, man, it ain't ever too late to learn from someone who is older, who is doing exceptional work, and then how to flip it so that we're providing that back.
And get different mentors for different scenarios, man. Like, listen, if you want to be in shape, have somebody that's fit mentor you. If you want to be a better husband, talk to somebody who's been married for 50 years. Like, don't talk to your single ass friends who ain't, you know, like, I'm not a person to talk to. I have no patience. Like, but somebody for 50 years can give you wisdom and be like, bro, pick your arguments, pick your battles. If you want to be a master teacher, how about you talk to a master teacher or somebody that's been in it? Like, if you continue, and people have to be willing. And here's the thing, even if you are young, you don't even have to, like, observing somebody with reverence and respect can be a form of mentorship. Like, Gary V told me this, and he was like, look, you know, you can steal my mentorship. I put everything out there. Like, how you listen and take heed is up to you. So, I mean, again, I like this topic because this isn't always about a system. It's not about what the school is doing. It's not about what the job is doing. This is about you. This is about you as a mentee / mentor. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you want that, go get it. You know, if you want somebody at that job to mentor you and they say they got an open door policy, guess what you have to do? You got to walk through the fucking door. So, I mean, like, at some point, you got to take accountability and responsibility for your path on this journey that we call life. And if you don't, you're just going to be miserable and mad at the world, and people are going to be confused as to why.
Yeah, we have enough of that.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I love George Lopez, David, but I do. I
did too. But
I get it.
All the Latino comedians have issues, man. Carlos Mencia, and
well, he Ned isn't even Mexican. Ned is
I know
that was the whole thing that came out, you know. But again, though, right? Carlos Mencia's real name is Ned.
His name is Ned.
Yeah.
He's.
Wait, I didn't hear about this.
Yeah, man.
It's the whole thing.
Mitzi Shore from the Comedy Store says you can't be a Mexican comedian and your name's Ned. You got to have a different name. And he's not even Mexican; he's Honduran. So he changed his name to Carlos.
He just went with it because that was what he like. And then it's just,
Omar's like, wow.
And here's the thing.
Well, yeah, man, like if it couldn't get worse, because like I already lacked an immense amount of respect for like Carlos Mencia, and like I'm mocking it. You know, and then like South Park did the whole thing on it. Like, oh man, I'm not funny, man. I find shit other people said, man, and I just repackage it in the Mexican accent, and I'm not funny, man. Shit, man, I'm not even funny. Man.
I mean, here's the thing, right? This is why I respect people like Lopez, and I have empathy for him, right? Like, listen, if you're one of those guys, if you're a Lopez, a Pryor, like, and you came up through some stuff, it's look, I get it. Like, sometimes you could be jealous, right? Sometimes it's like, I had to go through all this shit. I had to do, you know, black comedians talk about the chitlin circuit. Like, they got an issue with these kids that come up and just get to do stuff on TikTok. They ain't got to go through Alabama and these rooms with 7 and 8 people. You know, I've seen he's one of my favorite guys. He used to write for Richard Pryor. He just passed away. Man, I've had conversations with him. Paul Mooney. I've seen Paul Mooney so much because he just was he was blackballed. So I always saw him in San Francisco, and he'd have coffee with you and all this stuff. But he would tell these stories. I understand these old guys like that's like fuck that. Like, you know what I'm saying? But it does make them look bitter. People get on my guy for looking bitter. So
I love Paul Mooney.
I do too, man.
I love Paul Mooney too, man. We should do a show on comedy. I don't know how we're going to tie that.
If you love Paul Mooney, you should read his book. We read it in my book club. It is incredible. It is
Oh, wow.
incredible.
Okay.
It is incredible. It is and it talks about the Bay Area a lot, David. So like Berkeley, like he took Richard Pryor out of LA when he was just getting high and fucked up. Like he took him to Berkeley and like got him cleaned up. And then when it was time to
fed
go
him
back
a bunch
to LA,
of lettuce and hummus and other.
And he like cried, but he like cried. He was scared to go back to LA. Like he was that for Richard Pryor. It's really interesting. I
is
really
this Black is the New White?
I think so. Yeah,
it's called.
It's really
Black
good.
Is the New White.
It's really good. If you like him, you will.
I love Paul Mooney. Yeah, and I mean, like I'm late in life to Paul, right?
He
so
was
like
I didn't high and shit. Like I didn't know this.
Yeah. I didn't know about Paul until Chappelle's show. And then I started doing like the kind of research and being like, yo, you go back to Richard Pryor, you go back to Eddie Murphy.
He
like
wrote.
the level of impact and writing that he did. I'm like, oh shit, okay. I'm going to grab that book. Are you sure that that's the name of the book? Probably the only book
That's it.
Right?
I'll double check, but that's it. It's really good. I'll reread it with you. I mean, it's really, I liked it that much. And also because that man gave me so much of his time and like just talked to me. Like it was really cool. I saw him in Berkeley and like we just I bought him coffee and like he just was honored that I bought him some coffee based off who he was. And we talked for like 2 hours.
Wow, dude. Wow.
I'm kind of taken aback, man. That's badass.
Yeah, man.
Really cool. Gentlemen, speaking of which, we're at the end here. We got to tie this whole little show up with a ribbon.
Sorry, we kind of went all over the place. That's my fault. I'll take blame for that. Sorry.
No, man. I love when the show goes on these incredible tangents because I feel like it's not just us talking heads. I'm like, oh shit, there's a real conversation. I'm learning stuff, man. And to our audience, man, who was always participating, thank you. But gentlemen, final thoughts. I'm happy to get started, or if anyone wants to jump into this.
It's your show. I can go, man. I can get out the way, man. I think
I'm getting out the way, man.
No, man, the mentor
badass, man.
I appreciate that. The mentor thing is important, and I think having one and being one is a thing. I think it makes you better to being a mentor. I think we should always be being mentored and mentoring. I mean, David, I say this all the time on the show. I mean, I say it when we're in business meetings. Like, you know, David was that for me in a lot of different ways. I was the outspoken dude in Oakland, and you know, and he knew what it like for nobody on either side to like you. And it was really him and Jorge, man, like really looked out for me in that space in Dirk. And I probably wouldn't have lasted as long without those people. So, you know, I appreciate that. And that's why it doesn't matter what the call is. I'm always going to look out for that dude. In the same way, Tom Brady can be 80 years old. His line is always going to be his line. They say something bad about Tom Brady in front of the wrong people, it's going to be a problem. So I feel that way about David and a few other people. So thank you for being my mentor.
Hey, man. Well, I appreciate that, Charles. And you know, just so you know, like you've mentored me in different ways, and I've learned from you in so many, and I continue to learn from you, right? So like we have this we've created this like circle of people, and then you're part of other circles, I'm part of other circles, right? But we're all connected in this different way, right? And a lot of it has to do with like our work, but a lot of it also has to do with just like being able to like relate and have human conversations, right? And
I appreciate that.
So on this like mentoring thing, my closing thought is that, you know, on this show we talk about education, and most of the time we talk about like what we call formal education, right? K-12, private school, charter schools, college, university, in a classroom, you know, in that setting. But really the mentoring can happen anywhere, right? Mentoring is not informal. It's actually the original kind of form of education, of passing down, passing across, passing up knowledge, right? And so when I say passing up, I mean I get mentored by like young people because I'm like not so young anymore, and they're like, well, here's how it happens now. Here's how it works. That's mentoring, right? But I think it can happen in two different ways, right? It can happen in like the aspirational, the inspirational, like achieve to do this, achieve to be like this, achieve to accomplish this. And then there's also a very practical side of mentoring of like, we're just going to talk about what you shouldn't do. Don't ask me why, but just don't do these things and you're going to be a better person for it. And there's a lot of stories embedded within that, right? So I think, it's almost, there's no curriculum for it. It's really, it really goes back to like ancient civilizations before we had books, a lot of times before we even had spoken languages, of just passing on information from one person to another, right? Passing on stories, passing on lessons, right? Passing on things to look out for in terms of danger, right? And all those things. So I think, yeah, it's been an interesting show. Great topic, Omar, and it's got me thinking back to my my pre-Columbian indigenous roots. So I'm going to burn some sage tonight and some copal, right? And I'm going to have me a little ceremony tonight.
Yes. I mean, dude, I love
that sounds dope. I would ask you to take a picture, but it sounds like it might be disrespectful to do that. But that sounds awesome.
I don't know. That's David, man. I can't add to the comments. I kind of wanted to share your book, so I shared it to the private comment if you wanted to share with our audience. I'm going to end on just a quick note of what I love about David is that David takes this immense amount of initiative. And what I think Doc's ebook is all about is taking the initiative. So for our audience members, if you're seeking mentorship, like I said with my boy Retta, like it's never too late. And I think Doc said it, or Dave said it really well, like it's never too late to learn. And there's always something to either learn or to give back. And it doesn't matter about age. You can learn from young people. They could be mentoring you on things. But what I love about this ebook is that it gives you the opportunity and structure to say, if there's a mentorship need for your child, if there's a mentorship need for someone that you care about, particularly that's a young person, here is a great way of taking the initiative so that instead of waiting for it to happen, you can start facilitating it and making it happen for your child inside of the school. And it's kind of like what, both Doc and David were saying. Here's a little bit, kind of like Eddie Murphy. Like, I'm not going to do the whole thing for you. Let me get you into the show. Let me get the ball rolling. But after that, you can take it. Doc's book is so much about this is going to get the ball rolling in a very positive way so that you can facilitate an excellent mentorship for your child. But man, take a look, because it gives you some really cool insights on here's some conversation starters and some ways that you can find a mentor even for yourself in terms of areas that you're seeking some guidance on. So
and the book isn't just for Black people, brother. It's not just for Black people.
Yes.
The number one group that reads this book, it emails me, it sends me messages, Asians. They send an apology, but they say, I'm new to this country, don't know how to navigate. This has been great.
Love it.
I hope you're not offended. By far, the most emails I get is from Asian people about that book.
Which should be emblematic of the fact that this has nothing to do with race.
Not at all.
David was saying, this has everything to do with just finding someone who you can learn from. And it's badass that, like Asians were saying, this is something that I found ludicrously useful as I'm navigating a new world. I'm like, man, how often do we take for granted what we think is very simple, but very complicated for others? So on behalf of Jubilee Ransom, who we love and miss, the Beard of Knowledge, David Castillo, the real Dr. Charles Cole, and I am Omar Yanad. We are your co-hosts. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week. Peace.